Alright, today I'm talking about several Ibanez neck profiles to give more insight and information about them, besides the typical fast and flat description they get. The neck profiles I'll be talking about in this video are the Wizard 3, as seen on this S770, the Wizard, as seen on this RGA 21P1PB from the premium line, the PIA from the PIA 3761, the Super Wizard HP as seen from this RG652 and this RG5320, and there's a reason why I have a few examples. The Super Wizard as seen from the Genesis series, like this RG550 and this 540P3, and the J.Custom Super Wizard as seen on this RG8570Z. Check the timestamps and skip to the neck profile you need more information on. Well, it's true on the website, these different neck profiles largely have similar, if not the same, dimensions listed. These different neck profiles have slightly different shapes and different feels to them. This video will not be a review of the guitars. I do have reviews of these guitars on my channel, but this will be a discussion about the different neck profiles and how they feel. This video is not sponsored by Ibanez or anyone else. These are all my guitars, and I currently don't have an AZ. Nothing against the AZ, I just don't have one, so sorry about that. Can't speak to that. So this video is intended to give you some more information. Not everyone has the luxury of going to a fully stocked guitar shop and trying guitars out, so I hope this helps. In general, these neck profiles are between a thin C and D shape. And by the way, all these guitar necks have a 25.5-inch scale length. But let's go ahead and jump right into specifics now. Alright, so first the Wizard 3 on this S770's CZM. According to the Ibanez website, this has a thickness of 19mm at the 1st fret and 21mm at the 12th fret, with a fretboard radius of 400mm. And 400mm is approximately 15.75 inches. All of these guitars shown will have a nut width of 43mm. This is the thickest of all the necks we're going to be talking about today, but it's only by 1mm. Do you feel the difference in playing this neck profile of the Wizard 3 versus the other profiles we'll talk about? Yes, you do. This one feels like a mix between a C shape and a D shape. It's not fully oval, but it does seem somewhat close. The fretboard radius of 400mm feels flat, but not too flat. This is of course coming from an Ibanez fan, so if you're coming from a guitar that has, say, a 12-inch radius or less on the fretboard, this is still going to feel very flat, very different. The Wizard 3 does have a special place in my heart, even though it's not my personal favorite. Back when I was gigging some years ago now, I had an S470 that had the Wizard 3 on it. That was a lot of fun. I do tend to prefer the feel of the Prestige neck profiles, but that being said, the Wizard 3 did serve me well. And some days I even prefer the feel of this over others. Maybe I've warmed up to it more in recent years, maybe it's nostalgia. But the point is, just because this is the thickest neck relative to everything else we're talking about today, that doesn't make this bad. Maybe for your hands, this will actually be the best feeling neck. Now let's talk about the Wizard profile as seen on this RGA 21P1PB Premium. Not all premium line guitars have this neck profile, so check on the Ibanez website. Now this neck has dimensions of 18mm thickness at the 1st fret, and at the 12th fret it's 20mm thick. The fretboard radius is still 400mm, so still that 15.75 approximate inches. So this profile feels less like an oval, a bit more D-shaped, but not a D shape with too much shoulder. One interesting thing that I've noticed when playing guitars with this neck is that even though it's pretty close to a Wizard 3, it feels closer to a Prestige when you play it. If I had to make an educated guess as to why that was, maybe it has to do with the fretboard radius being a little rounder than the Prestige, but the neck thickness is thinner than the Wizard 3. Maybe some combination of that. Of course, I'm not saying it feels just like a Prestige. It does feel different. Playing with this neck, though, it feels like a pretty good all-arounder. You do feel pretty comfortable doing rhythms, doing riffs, playing slower chords, playing leads. You can shred on it, too. All around, it's not too shreddy, like not too thin, but it's also not too thick. You do feel pretty good getting your thumb behind the neck and really going. All right, the PIA. What a guitar. This neck profile has a thickness of 18mm at the 1st fret, and at the 12th fret, it has a thickness of 20mm. So it's just like the Wizard from the premium line, except this has a fretboard radius of 430mm, so about 16.9 inches. So because of this combination of dimensions and fretboard radius, it feels slightly thicker than the Wizard from the Premium. And because of this is really great to play, I find, for me anyway, on extended playing sessions. Recording, practice, things like that. I'm not saying you can't play a long time on the Premium or a Prestige neck or a different neck profile, but for me, this feels absolutely fantastic when doing that. And I'm not saying this is better or worse than other neck profiles too. It's merely different. All right, now let's talk about the Super Wizard HP neck profile as seen on these Prestiges. You have a thickness of 17 millimeters at the 1st fret, and at the 12th fret, there's a thickness of 19 millimeters. The fretboard radius is 430 millimeters. So why do I have two guitars to talk about one neck profile? I've noticed a difference in the feeling between these two. If we turn these around and you look at the back, you can see they're made of slightly different things. On this guitar here, on the RG652, you can see it's maple walnut in a 5-piece construction. And on the RG5320, it's maple and wenge in a 5-piece construction. And I've noticed on the guitars with the walnut in there, they tend to be a more thin C, versus the ones with the wenge, they tend to be a bit more on the D-shaped side, but still between a C and a D. As a rule of thumb, I've noticed that the less expensive Prestiges have that kind of thin C shape, and the more expensive Prestiges, with the stainless steel frets for example, tend to have that slightly more D-shaped neck. So the latter tends to feel a bit more chunky, and just like the PIA, I do find it is pretty comfortable to play for extended playing sessions. But the former here, it feels somehow more natural. It feels thin, but not too thin. One thing that really highlights the differences in the same neck profile is taking a look at an older guitar. I have this RG655. It's from 2015. And this also has the Super Wizard HP neck profile. But this one feels thinner, like a really thin C. It feels thinner than almost all the other neck profiles we're going to talk about. Almost too thin. But just like the other Prestiges shown, this has the same measurements of 17 millimeters at the 1st fret, 19 millimeters at the 12th fret, 430 millimeter fretboard radius. Going from this, the 655, to this, the 5320, was pretty much a shock. At first it almost felt like a mistake. This neck did feel noticeably chunkier compared to this. But after playing this one more time, just to test it out real quick, I couldn't put it down. And this more modern Prestige neck shape really felt like it was giving me something I was missing. It wasn't too thin, but still giving me that kind of thin playing experience. So maybe it's because it is slightly more like a D shape. Maybe it is slightly thicker. This should give you some good information when picking out a Prestige. All right, the Genesis, and I've got this RG550 Genesis in Road Flare Red. I'm sorry if the lighting makes it look a little orange. This has the Super Wizard neck profile, and it has measurements of 17 millimeters at the 1st fret, 19 millimeters at the 12th fret, and that 430 fretboard radius. And this has the measurements of 17 millimeters at the 1st fret, 19 millimeters at the 12th fret, and a 430 millimeter fretboard radius. So this Super Wizard neck profile, it feels more like the neck profile on the less expensive Prestiges. This does feel very natural, very fun to play. Definitely if you're an Ibanez fan, it'll feel this way, but if you're coming from a different brand with thicker necks, this will still take some getting used to. Although that being said, in this day and age, there are lots of brands out there that do have thin and flat necks, so maybe it won't be so bad. This neck profile is one that is really fun to just pick up and play. I find that even if I'm not using this guitar for the day, I like to pick it up, play it, practice, jam around a little bit, just because the neck feels so good to play. Of course, this is for my hands. You might prefer a different neck profile better, but something about this thin C with a slight shoulder just feels really good to play. And then I have this 540 P3 Genesis. It also has the Super Wizard neck with the same dimensions, same measurements. However, this one feels slightly thicker. Just like the neck on the RG550 though, this is fantastic fun to just pick up and play. Although that could be because of the guitar body it's on. And then finally the J.Custom. I have this RG8570Z here, and this has the J.Custom Super Wizard neck profile. This has the same dimensions as the other Prestiges. So at the 1st fret it has a thickness of 17 millimeters, 12th fret 19 millimeters, and a 430 millimeter fretboard radius. This neck profile, however, feels the thinnest. It feels almost too thin, and sometimes it is too thin. Similar to the RG655 I talked about earlier, this is a very flattering guitar to play, and you can feel it's an unmistakably high quality instrument. That being said, it's also the easiest to get hand fatigue playing this guitar, and that is because the neck is so thin. So definitely make sure your guitar setup is on point. Definitely warm up before you start playing. Because of this neck profile, this guitar is played occasionally. It's used sparingly in recording sessions. I try not to play it for too long. My technique has improved a little bit over the years, so it's gotten a bit better. But when they say Ibanez necks are paper thin, they're talking about this. So overall, does it even matter which neck profile you choose? These are all Ibanez, these are all generally kind of flatter necks. Of course, you don't have to just play a certain type of music on these, you can play whatever you want. You can play fast, you can play slow, you can play clean, you can play distorted. These are tools to make music, and where your playing hand interfaces with the instrument, the guitar neck, is very important to get right for you. The setup matters a whole lot too, how high the strings are off of the neck, how much the neck bows. But minor differences in the shape of the neck profile can have a major impact on you, the player. A J.Custom's neck will feel like a shred paradise to some, and a paper-thin torture device to others. You don't need to be aspirational when you're shopping for a guitar or looking around at different neck profiles. If you feel more comfortable on a thicker neck, for example, you don't have to force yourself to buy a guitar with a thinner neck, saying, oh, my technique will just improve. What would I use each guitar neck profile for? They do fit the general Ibanez playing experience to some extent, but they are good in their own way once you get into the super fine details. Of course, what works for one player's hands might not work for the other. In general, running through it real quick, the Wizard 3 is never going to be too thin. It'll be a solid choice. The Wizard, being a little thinner, will be an excellent all-arounder for everything you're trying to do. The PIA will be excellent for long sessions, including but not limited to lead playing. The Super Wizard HP will be a great mix of speed and endurance, and can tend to be thinner with older models. The Super Wizard is also a great mix of speed and endurance, and is fun to play. And the J.Custom will be as thin as they come. Use this if your thumb behind the neck technique is on point. Now, which is my favorite? Of course, you can have a great music career with any one of these neck profiles. But if you've watched this far, you probably don't want the safe answer, you just want a single answer. So my personal favorite neck profile is the one on the Prestige, the Super Wizard HP. The modern versions are very comfortable to play, and I've had a lot of fun playing them. It feels like the best of all worlds out of all these neck profiles discussed today. But of course, it's important to pick the right neck profile for you. You won't be doing yourself any favors picking a guitar neck profile that hinders you instead of helps you. So hopefully this information was helpful. Do you have any other questions or thoughts? Be sure to comment down below. And of course, this is YouTube, so I have to say the YouTube things. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share the video, print out every frame and mail it. Check out the socials, join the Discord. If you're looking for something cool to listen to, I have music on all major streaming services. I do original songs and some video game music covers. And as always, peace.